Hey guys, Jake and Sarah Salyer with another episode of At Our Kitchen Table. Today we want to cover just kind of some questions that we see pretty often. We want to go over what could really go wrong from the point that we've got you under contract, or we'll say a listing agreement between us, some issues that we may encounter. We'll start with why your house has not been seen or is not getting traffic.
Yeah, low activity.
So we just did a video on the market right now, and what we're seeing is homes are flying, but we have a showing later on this afternoon, and I was looking at, okay, if I'm seeing anything that gets into the 20-day mark or high teen mark that's days on market, I'm wondering what the heck's going on? Why is that house not flown?
Number one, you have to think of your photos. We say photos capture the eye immediately. Everybody's looking for their homes online. So as long as we have good pictures and the pictures, the preparing for pictures were done correctly, we have a checklist. We've, kind of mentioned that before. We always provide checklists for our sellers to get prepared for that. It's so important to follow that for the reason of people are scrolling through their phones and that's going to be the first thing that they see. That brings me to my second thing as far as what people see is the curb appeal. It sounds crazy, but we have a lot of buyers. They'll say, hey, we drove the neighborhood and we drove by the house and it's an out for us. The flower beds are a mess. There's maybe trash out there or something like that. It's just a little unruly. There's a million cars parked out front or something. Just keep those things in mind that people do that. People do go and they drive the neighborhood. They want to get a feel and see how things are going.
We live in an age of cyber stalking and a little bit of in-person stalking. So if they see the pictures and they love the pictures and that draws them in, they may just say, hey, with the current market conditions, we're going to drive by, and they see it and they're just like, no. I'm looking at price per square foot. Well, if the price per square foot for an older home or not a brand new home is in the $130 a square foot mark, and this house particularly had been on the market for 26 days. One of the biggest things we always say is price drives traffic, right? So if their price is way up here and their square footage is way down here, so their price per square foot is super high, that's something that's gonna ding them. Or if they've got competitive houses in that price range, this price range was 175. They could get a 1,600 square foot for the 175, or they could get a 1,400 square foot for 175. They obviously want more bang for their buck, right? They're gonna go towards a larger home.
Well, and that comes into, okay, we finally get an offer, but it's a lowball offer. What do we do with that? How do we handle that? And the biggest thing that we tell not only our buyers but our sellers is this is business. You can't take it personal. From a seller point of view, it's hard to not take it personal. We all love our homes. We think our homes are so great. Generally, our homes are great, but you have to think a seller's wanting to get the most and the buyer's trying to get it for the least. So that buyer is going to pick apart everything that they can to validate their lower offer. Doesn't mean you have to accept it. Doesn't mean that, it's like, well, no, or turn it away. Always counter, always counter offer, because that counter is going to see not only how much that seller is willing to move, but also how much the buyer is willing to come up.
We've covered this in our other videos. We recently had a transaction. Sorry. No,
you're fine.
There you go. And recently we had a transaction where somebody said, they came in super low. It was a $250,000 house. They came in at $225,000, and my sellers were like, "That's rude." I was like, "Okay, well, let's counter." Well, we ended up at $248,000. Yeah. So they just came in super low to see if they could. Yeah. And yes, it was rude. We don't take offense. Yeah. Again, this is business, but we got them all the way up here. So they started super low just to see what would happen or how desperate our sellers were, when they weren't desperate at all. But at the end of the day, the people really loved the house. We came together, we made the deal work. Right. So always get a counter back out there. Everybody wants the best deal. Everybody wants to get it for the lowest, but you as a seller want to get it for the most, right? So somewhere in the middle, we're going to come together. A little side note, if you guys saw me smile real big and cheesy earlier, our kids are outside with our dogs. So one of them was looking at me and tugging on the dog. This is completely unscripted, guys, if you guys haven't noticed, where I mess with her a lot. But anyway.
So coming back to, okay, now we're under contract and we're awaiting appraisal. The activity of the market is so hot. Buyers are eager. Buyers are so willing to pay, not only asking, but even over asking, which is okay, but we have to look at the neighborhoods as a whole and what that neighborhood is gonna support, because that's exactly what an appraiser is gonna say. Hey, it's great that the buyer is willing to pay, you know, whatever over, but appraisers don't just poof come up with a number and say, well, that's what I think it's worth. They're looking at the numbers, they're looking at comps, they're looking at what's sold and everything that's going on currently in that neighborhood to support that value. And that's where it's coming. So what if we do have an appraisal come in that's lower? Again, it's negotiable. It doesn't necessarily mean that seller has to come down. It doesn't mean that the buyer has to come up. It all depends on their financial situation. Are we covering closing costs? Do they have money in the bank to bring it, you know, to bring the extra money? It's all depending on financial situations. The seller may not be able to afford to come down that low. You know, it just depends. But again, it's all negotiable. It will get worked out. Here's something that doesn't necessarily happen a lot, but I'm gonna say what happens if a seller wants to cancel a contract, or what happens if a buyer is ready to back out, and what that looks like. From a buyer's perspective, it's really hard for a buyer to not be able to back out of a contract. They put up the earnest money, which is generally $500 to $1,000. Earnest money is the good faith money that buyer's gonna follow through. However, if we go through inspections, we've talked about inspections, if we get through appraisal and we're having issues there, that buyer has the right to receive their earnest money and cancel the contract.
Right.
But there is a clause, I guess you could say, in the contract that states the buyer cannot back out within 10 days of the closing date. It's much harder for a seller to get out of a contract.
You would be tied up in court. We have a friend that's literally got somebody tied up in court in attorney's fees for over a year now, because the seller just decided that they didn't want to sell. Well, that's not how that works. Unfortunately, it's kind of like renters and landlord rights. Renters have all the rights, landlords have none. Buyers have all the rights, sellers have none. So it's very rare that a buyer can lose their earnest money. You know, I've had a seller at one point say, cool, well, where's my check, when they backed out because of inspections. That's not how that works. Unfortunately, there's several clauses in there that they will get their earnest money back. But it's rare that that happens unless the inspections are just something terrifying. So
we just wanted to kind of touch base on the bigger topics of what things could go wrong and how do we handle them. There are other hiccups that come up along the way, title issues, lender issues, or things like that. There are so many other things, but rest assured, usually they don't happen, and everything can be walked through. As long as we have a willing buyer and we have a willing seller who can put personal things aside. This is a transaction, it's a business transaction. We are here to facilitate that and make sure everything goes as smooth as it can. So, anything else you got to add?
No, we appreciate you guys watching. Like we always say, like, comment, subscribe. If you've got questions, call, text, email, whatever we can do for you. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.